All right, here we go. Can everybody see that? Yes? Great. So here we are, full moon in Pisces, September 2020. About 10:20 this evening Pacific time, so adjust for your own time zone. That's when the sun and the moon reach opposition and our full moon is perfecting. So here's what to expect from our time together today. We will look in general at what is a full moon. What does the energy of a full moon mean? How can you work with it in your life? Then we'll look at the energies of this particular full moon, the Virgo Pisces polarity, because that's where this full moon falls. And we'll also spend some time with what's special about the Pisces full moon in 2020. What are the big energies, planetary energies that are supporting this illumination? Then we will learn how to find this full moon in your own chart, and that will allow you to discover what is being illuminated for you under these energies. So although there is a lot of value in this presentation for you, no matter where you are in your astrological journey, it is geared towards those who are newer to astrology. So don't worry if you don't know a lot of astrology, I've got you. We'll be learning together today. So this is me. Here I am. This is me. I am teaching about one of my favorite things in the world to teach about, which are the cycles of the moon. This is foundational work if you're wanting to begin your studies of astrology, because all planets have phases. The phases of the planets speak profoundly to our life cycles and how we live into the emotional and psychological reality of our life and our chart. So really understanding the lunar cycles and the phases of the moon, the relationship that is between the moon and the sun, gives us such a strong foundation for continuing our studies in astrology. So that's why I love to teach about this. I am an award-winning astrologer and psychic. I have won an award for teaching about the moon, so that's why I'm doing this. I have 25 years of teaching and leading leadership experience, helping people to come home to their bodies, to natural cycles, and to the divine feminine. So I appreciate you choosing to study with me, and I hope that some of that makes you feel good about your decision to do so. Here's a really beautiful quote that kind of grounds us in this idea of lunar wisdom. It was lunar symbolism that enabled humans to connect such things as birth, becoming, death, and resurrection, the waters, plants, woman, fecundity, and immortality, the cosmic darkness, prenatal existence, and life after death, followed by the rebirth of the lunar type, light coming out of darkness, weaving the symbol of the thread of life, fate, temporality, and death. So, in other words, the complete cycle from yang to yin and back again, the complete in-breath and out-breath of the universe, the complete cycling of dark and light as we experience it on this planet. Most ideas of cycle, dualism, polarity, opposition, conflict, but also of reconciliation of contraries, were either discovered or clarified by virtue of lunar symbolism. We may even speak of a metaphysics of the moon, a consistent system of truths relating to becoming, growth, waning, death, and resurrection. So the moon is where we have turned from time immemorial as humans to see our own cycles of regeneration reflected in the cosmos. And we have historically learned from her and built myth around her and understood our own psychology and life cycles through her cycling, and we continue to do so today. I love this idea of the metaphysics of the moon, a consistent system of truths relating to becoming, growth, waning, death, and resurrection. And if you have spent any time with me, you'll know that one of the things that I love to share is honoring the equal importance of the yin half of the cycle, the dark waning half of the cycle, especially within a culture that tends to honor only the bright yang becoming aspect of the cycle. So the moon teaches us about the equality of those two sides of our cycles, whatever our creative cycles are. Our whole life cycle down to all of our creative projects, down to our daily life of night and day. So the full moon is a time of illumination. What's happening astronomically is what's demonstrated here by this terribly out of scale little graphic. And that is that halfway through the moon's cycle around the earth, she comes into what is called an opposition with the sun, which means that from the perspective of us here on earth, it looks as if the moon is in one side of the sky, the sun is in the other. They are opposed. The moon begins her cycling in conjunction with the sun, taking up the same space in the sky as the sun. This is why we can't see her. And then halfway through, 2 weeks into the cycle, she has reached opposition. And that is the definition of the full moon. It's an astronomical and astrological opposition. Moon across from the sun from our perspective here on earth. And I always encourage you to get out under the living sky and experience what this is. It isn't just an astrological aspect. It's a very real event in our living sky. And sunset on the full moon is the only time we get to experience moonrise and sunset at the same time, because they're 180 degrees apart. It's the only time in the lunar cycle when we experience that. And if it's clear and you have a clear shot of both horizons, east and west, you can go out under the night sky tonight, under the evening sky, and experience this opposition. Because as you watch the sunset, behind you, the moon will be rising. So that's the physical reality. What is the psychological reality that goes along with that? The full moon is both an opposition and an illumination psychologically. So the moon and the sun together have a full view of what's available. Anytime you have two people across from each other in a circle, they're looking in two different directions. And because of those opposite perspectives, there's a wholeness. One can see what the other can't. This is the situation with the sun and moon as they oppose each other during the full moon. So it's a psychological opposition as well as being a physical one. It's an opportunity for illumination. The daytime consciousness comes to the nighttime in the form of the moon taking on the most light that she will. So the parts of the psyche that are normally in darkness, in the shelter of nocturnal consciousness, become illuminated by the light of the full moon reflecting the sun. So this is, along with the physical reasons of the bright light that can shine into our room as a result of the full moon, this kind of invasion of solar consciousness into our nighttime being is part of what keeps us awake on those nights of the full moon. We can't completely surrender to the nocturnal consciousness of dream time because that space is being illuminated. It's quite natural to have wakefulness around the full moon, and it's part of embodying that psychological illumination and wakefulness. So there are reasons for our responses to these natural events. So it's a time of illumination. We can see what has been hidden. And we can see this in the world around us. We can see it within our own psyches, that full moon will be a time of sometimes intense emotion, sometimes revelation, and of course the culmination of the cycle. And that's not just a 29-day cycle, but also a 2.5-year cycle. So at the full moon, we find things coming to fruition that have been brewing for 18 months, and also on a smaller scale, things that have been brewing for a couple of weeks. We see them fully. So it's an opposition, an illumination. And because of that illuminating opposition, it's an opportunity for us to synthesize these two different energies. That's always the opportunity of an opposition, is to grow ourselves up through achieving a harmony between opposites, between apparent opposites. So every month we have that opportunity So we're halfway through the lunar cycle. The moon has traveled 180 degrees from the sun. We talked about getting out there and seeing that 180-degree opposition. They are in opposition and across from each other in the sky. They're at a point of culmination. The moon carries as much light as she can, and now she begins her yin cycle, right? She begins her waning cycle. She begins her release back into darkness. So it's that moment of fullness before release when everything is revealed. And here's the crux of what we can gain from working with the full moon energies, is this opportunity for synthesis. The sun and the moon are across from each other in the sky and across from each other in the astrological chart, which means they're occupying opposite signs. So we have the opportunity built in to this aspect to achieve balance and resolve issues around the opposition that's highlighted by those two signs. And what we always find with those signs that are complementary or opposite each other is that they both come at the same issue from differing perspectives. So it gives us a chance to achieve harmony around a certain issue in our lives by bringing together very different perspectives on that issue. So signs that complement or oppose one another operate on that same axis. They both bring in different ways of one issue. Uh-oh, somebody needs to mute. Thank you. I call these axes of transformation, because this brings this psychological opportunity to transform within ourselves. Each of the two signs on the axis holds a different approach to the same issue, and that's where we grow. That's where that full moon every month brings us an opportunity for growth on a different axis of transformation within our lives. It's actually such a beautiful and elegant system of personal growth if we track those lunar cycles throughout the year. Each full moon will be in a different sign. We move sequentially through the zodiac, and we get to explore each of those polarities as we move through the year. So we grow when we take that opportunity. Instead of feeling buffeted by these intense energies, we seize that opportunity for personal growth by synthesizing those opposites within ourselves. That's the full moon transformation, that opportunity to grow. And this gorgeous system that is available to us through the astrology of the moon. So here's where we are right now. So that is true every full moon of the year. Every time the moon is full, she will be full in the sign opposite the sign that the sun is in. So we move sequentially through the whole zodiac over the course of the year. So how we know what the job of our psyche is during each season is by looking at the issues that are brought to light along that axis. So the Virgo Pisces axis is where we're sitting now. The sun is in Virgo, we're in Virgo season. And because the sun is in Virgo, the full moon is in Pisces, right across from her. So this axis of those two signs, Virgo and Pisces, different though they are both really focused on service. So I call this the axis of service. And it's finding our ways of serving humanity through two very different approaches. The Virgo approach uses discernment. The Pisces approach is about unification and devotion. So think about how these two different energies really support each other. When we think about the service of Virgo, we think of a very practical, daily kind of service. We think about the skill of Mercury ruled Virgo, which is to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? Virgo being the priestess of the harvest, who is able to, on a very detailed level, discern what is nourishing from what is poisonous and to separate the two. So there's the Virgo concern for wellness. There's a Virgo concern for serving the community through attention to wellness, both spiritual and physical. And the key to those Virgoan abilities is discernment. The ability to tell the difference, to draw boundaries, to discern patterns. Pisces, on the other hand, is all about dissolving all of that, dissolving the patterns and seeing the oneness beneath. I was writing on Instagram this morning about the beauty that we see in the forest, the sacred geometry of Virgo that we see in plant life, which is so Virgo, right? But how we see always shimmering beneath those beautiful sacred geometric patterns of growth, we see shimmering underneath that this amazing magic of the plant world and the mystery of life shimmering underneath those patterns. And that evokes so well what that axis of Virgo Pisces is all about. They're both very magical signs, and Virgo sometimes gets the reputation for being overly practical or very concerned with the mundane. And that can be a way that Virgo shows up in the world, but there's a beautiful magic underlying the precision of Virgo. And Pisces, of course, gets the reputation for being a little bit out of it. But again, the magic of Pisces is that ability to go beyond and to dissolve into oneness and to recognize the true nature of the phenomenal world in which we live, which truly is all made of energy and truly is without boundaries. But that devotion to oneness of Pisces without the discernment of Virgo can be a dangerous dissolution. The discernment of Virgo without being informed by the mysticism of Pisces can be detail for the sake of detail, and a mundane that is not informed by spirit. So the two really need each other. They need each other and support each other. Discernment supports devotion, and devotion supports discernment. And the two together teach us about the ideal ways to serve. So we're developing our capacity for service along the Pisces-Virgo axis. So on the Pisces full moon, it's the sun, our shining self, our aspirations in the world that is holding up the Virgo side of this axis, right? Here we are with this whole month to enjoy Virgo energy and to all be honorary Virgos. Virgo is a mutable earth sign. She's holding up the end of summer. The energy of summer is transforming. That's the mutability. She's ruled by magical Mercury. The earth of Virgo is the earth of the harvest priestess, that ability to separate the wheat from the chaff, as we discussed. She's responsible for the well-being and nourishment of the community, both spiritually and physically, and helping us to endure through the hard winter. Virgo holds discernment, care, generous service to others, deep sensitivity and wholesomeness. So that sensitivity is in the true sense of a profound activation of the senses, that 4 or 5% of the population that is a highly sensitive person who can smell more and see more light. And we need those abilities to have that discerning nature of separating the good from the poisonous that Virgo has. Virgo embodies a healing and nourishing yin spirit and unites magic with mundane. Virgo serves through diligence and discernment. So the sun is holding up that side of the axis. And the moon tonight is holding up mutable Pisces. Pisces is mutable water, the complete dissolving into oneness, ruled by expansive Jupiter. Pisces brings union through dissolving and connects us with the limitless ocean of being. Pisces is art and mysticism, poetry and prayer. Pisces serves through union with all that is. The skillful use of Pisces energy can show us what true devotion and true surrender look like. So this is where we're dwelling. This is why the Pisces full moon can be especially emotional if we think about that energy that is contained in the Pisces heart. There's a beautiful intensity there and the accessing of our watery emotions. So we can ask ourselves, here's the lunar key for the Pisces full moon. We can ask ourselves, we can journal on this question and just contemplate it over the coming days. what is being illuminated around my balance of creating order, Virgo, and releasing outcomes, Pisces. So we're really being asked to hold those opposites and think about the ways that we create pattern and order in our lives and the ways that we need to surrender. Because an unhealthy extreme of Virgo is wanting to be able to control all outcomes by bringing order. And an unhealthy extreme of Pisces is overindulgence in whatever form of oneness one indulges in, whether it's chemical or prayer or whatever takes you there. There can be an overindulgence that allows us to neglect our mundane life. So thinking about the full moon highlighting this balance within you, what's going on for you right now. And these energies are so intense for us right now because so much in our world right now feels out of our control. And I think sometimes that brings a tendency to either go all Pisces or all Virgo, right? Wanting to just surrender and lose ourselves in something, whether it's a Netflix binge or too many glasses of wine or whatever it is, just to block it out. Or on the other hand, to overwhelm ourselves with anxiety about the details in our life to try and shield ourselves from the unexpected by having total control. So it's a thin line that we walk between these two, and that we can learn how to skillfully walk that line by thinking about where Virgo and Pisces land in our chart and where our natural skills for discernment and for release lie. So that's how we bring it home. We look to our own chart and we discover where Pisces and Virgo live in our own chart. So this moon specifically, and before we start looking at our own charts, I want to say another couple of words about this full moon in particular. Actually, I think I'm just going to go ahead and complete the presentation so then I can pop out of the slides and show you the chart of this particular full moon. So some of you may be completely new to astrology and not have your chart in front of you. That's okay. We're going to look in a minute at how to find Pisces in your chart, even if you only know your rising sign. But for those of you who are already a little farther down this path and know how to find 10 degrees Pisces in your chart, you can do that. And that will show you the house and area of life that is being illuminated for you by this full moon. So our astrological chart is divided into these little pie slices, 12 of them, called houses, which are measurements of time in the chart. But beyond that, they show the scope of different areas of life within the chart. So by looking at the 12 houses in the chart, we can learn about which areas of our life are being affected by any given transit. So this is, when I say transit, this is how the planets now in the living sky, like this beautiful living full moon in Pisces, are speaking to the planets in our natal chart, which are our enduring mandala of our life the natal chart doesn't change, even though our relationship to it changes. So how is the living sky speaking to that unchanging natal chart? Where is 10 Pisces in your natal chart? That is where the full moon is speaking right now. So how do we figure this out if we know nothing about our chart? All you need to know is your rising sign. And your rising
Bronwyn, you're muted.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. How much did you guys lose?
You were just beginning to explain how to find it with your rising sign.
Right. So if you're unfamiliar with your chart and don't know how to find 10 degrees Pisces, it's not a worry. You can find out your whole sign house that is being illuminated by this moon just by using this chart. So you may, in your own astrology practice, use a different house system, which means 10 Pisces might land in a different chart than what this tells you. This is based on whole sign houses, and it will give you accurate results. Every house system works within its own realm. So If your 10 degrees Pisces is giving you a different house than this system is giving you, don't worry, you can use either one or blend the two. But this is designed for those of you that may not be familiar with your chart yet. And this will give you an accurate idea of which area of life is being illuminated. So if you have Aries ascendant, it's your 12th, Taurus your 11th, Gemini your 10th, Cancer your 9th, Leo your 8th. This is rising sign, guys, not your sun sign, your ascendant. So really important to note that. This is nothing to do with what your sun sign is. It's your ascendant. Virgos will find this moon in their 7th. Libra risings will find it in their 6th. Scorpio risings in their 5th. Sag rising in their 4th. Capricorn risings will find this full moon in their 3rd. Aquarius ascendants will find it in their 2nd. And the Pisces, of course, ascendants will find this full moon in their 1st house. So now you're saying, okay, I know which house it is, so what? What does that tell me? So if you have discovered either through looking at your rising sign and whole sign house, or through looking at 10 degrees Pisces in your chart, which house is being illuminated by this Pisces full moon, pop that in the chat and let us know. Bonus points if you tell me a little bit about what's going on in your life. It's affecting my 1st house and I'm having questions about my identity and how I identify in this life, and perhaps bringing a more spiritual approach to being my authentic self showing up in the world. This Pisces full moon is illuminating my 1st house. Or it's illuminating my 2nd house of money and values and material world and needs, my personal resources and how I bring resources into my world. And I'm being asked to strike the right balance of discernment and release in my world of values. The 3rd house is the world of the mind, our communication, our learning. Sometimes it'll literally be things amongst our siblings or in our neighborhood, but also our mental energy and neural pathways and patterning. The 4th house is our home. It's our real estate. It's our actual home, but it's also what home with a capital H means to us, where we find security and shelter, how we have been affected by our family of origin, so our foundation. It's also our psychological stability. The 5th house is our joy. The 5th house is our children and our love affairs, but also our creativity and how we bring our creativity out into the world. So the reputation that is attached to the things that we create. The 6th house is our daily structures. The 6th house is often called the house of health. I think mainly because it has to do with our daily habits, and what we do with our daily habits has such a profound impact on our health and body. So it's our daily work and the people that we work with or work for or that work for us. All of that is 6th house stuff. The 7th house, we're popping up into the upper realm of the chart, right? And it starts to not just be about us, but about us in relation to others. So the 7th house is where we meet face to face with others. It's all of our important partnerships and our agreements and our emotional commitments and our ability to relate. And the 8th house is where we share our big important resources with others. So it's a lot about power and how we manage power with others. And it has various things to do with money, shared money. The 9th house is where we learn on a expanded level from the 3rd house, right? It's where we learn the higher things, whether that's literal higher learning or the spiritual learning that we do. The 9th house is all the trips that we take in life, whether literal or spiritual, and the spiritual teacher, whether that's within us or outside of us. And the 10th house, because it's the highest house in the chart, right? It's way up there. It's the most visible and prominent house. And so metaphorically, we can realize why it is a house of our reputation. It's our vocation, where we show up in the world, what we're known for, and how we manage our reputation. So maybe that's the house that's being illuminated for you under this Pisces moon. The 11th house is where we belong to the groups that we belong to. So it's our sense of belonging and our need for the collective, and also how we impact the collective. And because of that, it's where our hopes and dreams and friendships live. And the 12th house, of course, which is analogous to Pisces, is where we dissolve back into oneness, the most mysterious of the houses, the dark house, the 12th house, the house of karma and mystery and the spirit. So where is it hitting you? Where do you need to find balance in your Pisces Virgo? I'm going to drop out of this for now. I can bring back up that slide, and also it'll be there for you in the recording, but I am going to drop out of that now and see if Catherine wants to tell me about some questions or observations that you guys have. And as we chat through that, I'll talk a little bit more about just the chart of this full moon, because there's some interesting stuff going on in there too, with the time that we have left. So what have you guys got for me?
Oh, we've got some great insights from people into some of these. So we have a couple in the first house, a few in the 11th, 9th, 5th. So one that I thought was really interesting, Lena was saying it's illuminating her 8th house in shared resources, and the transformation is key for her here and now. Lots of change and things are shifting. You know, someone who typically goes back to work in September to teach, very appreciative this year with so many things going on in the world. She's trying to listen better to her body and internal wisdom, as there's holding and pause with all of this right now.
Right. So the 8th house too is one of the places where we do listen deep for internal wisdom, because as well as all of those things that I enumerated with shared power and shared resources, the 8th house, on a more profound level, if we think about shared resources, the 8th house is one of the places where we access ancestral wisdom, where we share our genetic resources, right? And where we access the power that is given to us by that. So the self-insight that comes from body wisdom very much lives in the 8th house. So I think that speaks to that speaks to what's happening for Lena. And this is a good moment to remind you guys about those longer lunar gestational cycles. So each new moon, quarter moon, and full moon is part of a longer family of lunations at or near that same degree and that same sign that lasts for 2.5 years. So 18 months ago, there was a new moon in Pisces, right? This would have been in March, late February or early March of 2019. Something began in your life. This is worth thinking about if this full moon is illuminating something big in your life, because whatever that is something that began 18 months ago with that new moon in Pisces in the spring of 2019. And it came to a big important choice point in December of 2019 with that first quarter moon in Pisces. And it's coming to fruition now. So this is a really simple predictive technique, but it's an incredibly powerful one to track back through those lunar gestational families and honor that larger 2.5-year cycle of lunar becoming. Excuse me. So if something doesn't come to mind immediately, it's worth jotting down those dates and thinking over the next 24 hours as you live into the intensity of this full moon. Think about what was coming to being, what was being conceived in your life around that time 18 months ago in the spring of 2019, early spring of 2019. Well, it was still Pisces season, right? And did you have a choice point around it in December? And what is coming to fruition around that now? I think in terms of mundane astrology, this is really interesting as well, if we think about the choice point and crisis point that came along for all of us in December, and how there's a culmination and an illumination going on around that now. So I wanted to bring that up, especially for everybody, but in terms of Lena's 8th house illumination, for you to think about that, Lena, and because I know that you do like to track those longer lunar gestational cycles. So, yeah.
There's I think this speaks to that point. Linda shares that it's hitting her ninth house, and she says the sweet spot, it's illuminated, and it's really the culmination of a very long, dark wait.
Yes. Yeah. So in the ninth house of higher learning, and maybe edging over into the 10th house of career, because I know there's some of those issues being illuminated over that longer 18-month cycle for Linda. Yeah, so I just completely lost my train of thought around that.
So Mary says that it's illuminating her sixth house, and they just moved into a new home, living in the sea of boxes and feeling overwhelmed, disorganized, body feeling tired, and feeling really challenged to get organized.
Right, so again, thinking about the choice points that were made last December around this move that's happening now. So it's interesting in terms of that timeline, and then the original decision, which might have been being made in the spring of 2019 for Mary. And then sixth house is perfect for that, right? Because if we're coming to an illumination point around our sixth house, we may have to really change up the way our daily life works. And we know that when we move and we're surrounded by boxes, everything feels different. We have to completely restructure our daily life and the way we live into our immediate surroundings. So on the one hand, Mary, that's going to feel really intense over these next couple of days. And I think just what I would recommend for you is if you can take some rest to appreciate that this move is the culmination of a huge creative journey that you have been on, and to really try to moderate your physical energy so that you're taking your time to live into the new habits and live into the new space, and taking that Pisces dream time to honor what it has taken to get you here. I think it's so sixth house to just kind of see the mess that's in front of you and worry about what needs to be structured. So this is where I would recommend with the Virgo Pisces balance for you, Mary, is to, instead of getting swept away by the Virgo details of every last little thing that needs to be organized, to take the time to celebrate, which is another key word for a full moon, right? We have things coming to fruition, and the illumination can be a time of celebration. And the moving into this new space is the culmination of a long creative project. So I would lean towards the Pisces side of that balance for you right now, to at least take a day off from organizing every last little object inside a box that now has to come outside of a box. Yeah.
Do we have time for a few more?
We do, because somehow, uncharacteristically, I got through the presentation really quickly.
Okay, so John says the moon's hitting his ninth house, stresses in jobs and spiritual groups.
Yeah, spiritual groups. It's interesting too in terms of what else is happening on the mutable axis there, because we have the nodes. They're, at least by sign, they're squaring this whole thing. So the reason that I'm bringing that up is thinking about spiritual groups and how we have our South Node in Sagittarius right now, and whenever that South Node moves through Sagittarius, it can be a lot about practicing our discernment. Let's just say practicing our discernment within our spiritual groups, because sometimes that Sag Node can get carried away. And so this would be a really good time to bring things back to your own personal sense of discernment. And so for you, John, I would say, and I was recommending to Mary to lean towards the Pisces side, and for you, I would say lean towards the Virgo side and reacquaint yourself with your strong sense of discernment. And so it's Pisces ninth, then the Virgo's landing in the third, and just thinking about your own basic spiritual practices, right? The third house being the house of the goddess, and kind of our mundane spiritual practices, bringing yourself back to those personal spiritual practices and how you practice your own sense of discernment, not based on anybody else's opinion, but on your own judgment of what's going to work for you, what's going to be pure and useful, and what's going to be less useful, and use those Virgo capacities to decide how you're going to show up in spiritual groups, because some of that may need to shift. There's so much mutable energy that is really affecting us in the way that we show up in our groups of belief, right? We can see this not only in our spiritual groups, but other places where we gather around shared beliefs. And the work of personal discernment is just paramount right now there. I'm thinking about that too for Linda, who had it showing up in her ninth, that there are ways that that idea of personal discernment is really useful too when deciding who to work with.
Great. So we have a few in the 10th house,
Mm-hmm.
but specifically Cindy says that she's creating an online business, moving location, and considering a public office position.
Wow. So moving location, considering public office, and she's got it in her 10th? Yeah, okay. And what was the third thing that's also happening? New job?
Creating an online business.
Right. Beautiful. So beautiful activation of the 10th house. So you're really feeling that Neptune in your 10th right now too, or maybe has moved over into your 11th, but I would imagine it just sounds like you're redreaming your whole life. So again, pulling back into that Virgo discernment in the 4th, this is the piece to make sure that you have grounding structures set up in your home life, where the 4th house speaks to the 10th house. This sounds like a big push to make dreams come true in the 10th. And it sounds like a beautiful time of illumination and culmination around those things. And to make sure that you're providing that support for yourself with that Virgo 4th house, just making sure you have those basic organized structures in place to support you within the home. Not so much 6th house stuff, but I'm talking about like wellness and self-care within the home, like the way you take care of your literal home hygiene in a way that supports you so you can fully show up for your work. Get help if you need it. That's what's coming to me. Like, do you need something as simple as, do you need household help to make sure you're being really supported in this big expansion out into the world? And you know, use the Virgo energy to analyze that and to see how you can feel even more supported and grounded. So we can always think about, for everybody, you can think about the other house that's involved too, that's across the way from what's being illuminated by the moon, is the house that's being illuminated by the sun, and where those houses can support each other. The home life of the 10th supports, of the 4th supports the going out in the world in the 10th. The personal spiritual practices of the 3rd support our integration with teachers and spiritual groups in the 9th. What else did we have? 6th and 12th, right? When we're overwhelmed with 6th house stuff, it's time to retreat into our spiritual practices and rest within that 12th house, and so on. You can work the axis with this full moon. I think we could do one more.
Did we do the 11th? I don't think we did the 11th.
I don't think we did.
Okay, so we have two. There's Cheryl that has it in her 11th, questioning belonging and fitting in.
Ooh.
And Gigi also has it in her 11th and questions about how she wants to best serve in her business.
Right. So so the 11th being illuminated, in terms of how best to serve in the business, I would think if that's coming up under this moon, it's how do you show up as a leader and walking that line between moving from peer to leader and role model, and how are you managing that within yourself and within the groups that you're working in. I think probably there's something to play with there around how to show up in a leadership role and in a spiritual mentoring role within the communities that you're already in, and how that can enhance what you're doing with your business. I would think about that with the Pisces 11th house being illuminated. And again, thinking back to what always supports the 11th house is the creative joy, and making sure that there's enough space for that, and that you're allowing that. And, you know, sometimes Virgo in the 5th house can be a challenge to allow ourselves to surrender to our creativity and to give ourselves the joy and the creative fuel of play, which is such an important fifth house issue. So I would think that the support for the shining self comes in just from creative play. And then that allows a real shining within community and allowing oneself to take more of a leadership role and just step into that without fear or after having managed your fear. So who else had 5th and 11th? There was the longing, belonging. Who was
Yes,
that?
so it was Cheryl, and she said questioning, belonging, and fitting in.
It's interesting because when you first read that out, I heard questioning the longing. So I'm wondering about really deep emotions around that idea of belonging and what is longed for in a group and in a community. And the availability of healing around that right now, emotional healing that can happen around 11th house issues through the light of this moon. Yeah, I think that's what I have to say about that. That's another thing about that Pisces 11th house and the way this moon is structured and the way, actually this for you too, Gigi, there's a whole thing around healing the way that we belong within our communities, that for anyone whose 11th house is being illuminated by this moon, I think there's a beautiful possibility there. That includes me. I have Pisces in my 11th. The moon, right before she became full, she had a conversation with Ceres, Demeter, our beautiful, nourishing harvest goddess who went and rescued her daughter from the underworld. So there's some wisdom there, the way that shows up in the 11th around our feelings of abandonment that we all have, absorbed from different life experiences that we've had, but how that, the ways, I think it's worth looking at the ways that we feel like an outsider. I think if that's landing in the 11th, it's worth looking at that and looking at new healing that might be available just by showing up in our groups and knowing that we belong and belonging in our creative uniqueness, right? In our beautiful Piscean selves. Yeah, that's a nice one. And I'm speaking to myself now too, because that's where it is for me too.
Okay, can we sneak in one more before you talk about the moon?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
happening? Okay, so Laura says it's in her first house, also conjunct her ascendant, and she's feeling called to release control and trust the rhythms of nature and spirit.
Ooh, that's beautiful. Like that right there is Pisces Virgo keywords. Read that again. I just love that because that's good advice for all of us right now under this moon. To release control and...
So to release control and trust the rhythms of nature and spirit.
Trust the rhythms of nature and spirit. So Virgo is all about the rhythms of nature. Pisces is all about the rhythms of spirit. And that's hitting you at the most sensitive axis in your chart, the ascendant, descendant, speaking to how you belong to yourself and how you belong to others. And who you are becoming, the new person that you are becoming. As anytime we have a planet crossing, that ascendant crossing out of the 12th and into the first house, it's a dissolving and relinquishment of what was in order to embody and identify with the new self. So as the moon does that each month, we have that opportunity to dissolve the old self and become the new self. So my feeling with that is just to keep trusting your instincts. What you're growing into is a self that can be even more dedicated to trusting your inner knowing, the oceans that flow through you and that flow through your body and that dance through you, and just trusting your instinct and intuition in ways that you never have before, and really integrating that into your identity even more, because there is discernment within that. I think that's really beautiful. It's a beautiful place to have that conjunct the ascendant. My goodness, that's a big deal. Yeah, good one. Okay, so I'm just, for those that are interested, I'm just going to share the chart. This is, you can ignore the houses because this is drawn for where I am in Qualicum Beach, British Columbia. But the aspect patterns and the planetary placements, this is the moment of the full moon. If you're new to astrology, you don't know how to read a chart, don't worry about it. If you're new to astrology and haven't really looked at charts very much before, the way to look at this is as if you were looking at an artwork. Like, what is the emotion that you get from these aspect patterns? What does this look like to you? Just use your intuition. These lines represent the interplay of energies between the planets in the living sky at the moment of the full moon. And the geometric patterns that they form speak to what we will all be experiencing under this moon. So obviously many layers of complexity, and especially under a Pisces moon, I just recommend that we all approach this from the level of art and thinking intuitively about how that picture of energies speaks to you. A couple of things that I would just like to bring to your attention. This moon, here we have our lovely moon, right? This is the glyph for the moon. And opposite from our sun in Virgo. And you'll notice that number 10, that's the 10 degrees of Virgo Pisces that the full moon happens at. And if we just let our eyes scan around the chart, we only see one other planet who's holding that space of 10 degrees. And that is the Great Awakener, the change bringer, Uranus at 10 degrees of Taurus. And she is forming a very positive aspect, a sextile and trine to this full moon. So Uranus, the change bringer, the Great Awakener in the fixed earth sign of Taurus, is lending support to this, the illuminations, which anytime Uranus is in the mix, it's a time to expect the unexpected, which means it's really nice that these are harmonious, flowing aspects. So I think this, on one level, can just ask us to be open to flashes of insight and illumination about what's happening. We always are open to flashes of illumination around the full moon, and what this does is it really pumps it up and amplifies it. So flashes of inspiration around our Pisces Virgo selves, with Uranus providing this support, and also unexpected positive events coming in. And this I'm thinking of in terms of that longer 2.5-year cycle, and the point that we're at 18 months in, that whatever that bigger story is, I would look to this moment, this week, as being a time when there can be unexpected positive developments, which would be so nice in this world of 2020, where the unexpected developments have not really had such a positive nature overall. So I think that Uranus is always a bit of a wild card, but here I'm seeing it as a positive wild card. The other piece that really stood out for me was just this conversation between the moon and Ceres, which I touched on before. But I think Ceres is just kind of touching the moon before she comes full, touching the moon with her wisdom and saying, yes, you do have the courage to go really deep, to explore and illuminate your own underworlds, to perform a rescue mission on the selves that may have been languishing in the underworld. And I'm thinking especially for those of us that have this 11th house illumination of our sense of belonging, that Ceres being in the mix can really elevate us and bring us into, sorry, that's Pearl voicing her opinion. I hope you can still hear me. Pearl, because this is important. Those hidden selves that have been languishing in the underworld can be brought to the surface, rescued by that energy of Ceres, and nourished and brought into the light. There's a lot going on in this chart. I could go on about it for a long time, and I'm not going to because we're running out of time and Pearl won't let me. But those were a couple of little things that I wanted you to be aware of, because Uranus can bring positive, sudden inspiration and illumination, and Ceres can bring this beautiful support for the abandoned aspects of the self, to bring them into light. Because Pisces can sometimes be that sort of sense of abandonment or sense of martyrdom, or even a little bit of self-pity. And Ceres here is performing that function of the rescuing mother within us. And I think that's quite beautiful. And with that, I believe I am being told by my little friend here that it's time for me to get off the call. But I appreciate all of you so much. Really appreciate you being here. I appreciate all of you that are watching later too. I mean, sometimes you get left out, and because this is Pisces and we're talking about belonging, I just want you to know how much I appreciate you and how you're very much present in our circle, even though you're watching in the future. You are included in our circle. And for all of you, I hope you can take some time tonight or tomorrow to really sit with these reflections and think about how you can nourish yourself with discernment and devotion. And with the big astrology coming up over the next 2 weeks, it's such a good time to take some time for rest, reflection, and nourishment of the spiritual self. We're all being really challenged. And be in service to yourself as well as in service to your communities, and just take such good care. You're all really special to me, and I really appreciate you showing up for this month after month. It's one of my highlights of the month, and I really appreciate you. So we will leave that there. The Lunar Planning Toolkit. This is my latest creation. We did a live call, but now I have reconfigured the whole class and added some things and broken it down into different modules and put some other goodies in there so that it makes a really easy to navigate and fun and really useful self-guided class. We do have monthly live Q&As, so there's still a live aspect to it. I will send a link along with the link to the replay. So if you all wanted to dive deeper into living with the lunar energies, living in with the phase cycles of the sun, and learning about your own chart and modulating your own energy throughout the month and throughout the year, there's an incredible set of tools in this offering. I'm actually really excited about what we've created. I love it. And if you guys aren't in there already, I would love to see you in there. I think it's going to be super supportive of, as we navigate these next 4 months of 2020. And there's a whole little piece in there too about that, about the transits of the rest of the year. So I hope to see you guys in there. That's the other piece that I wanted to talk to you about. And I'll see what I can do about a discount code for those of you that are watching this. Okay, that's what I've got to offer you as far as further support. I hope to see you next month. Have a beautiful night. Goodbye for now. Bye. Thanks for hanging in. Happy full moon. Bye, Lily. Bye, John. Bye, Donna. Bye, everybody.